Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
I'd like to start with a question. Why is it so important for you to be able to do a good poster presentation? I've got 3 quotes to show you, which I hope might explain why you need to be able to do it well. The first one really says that it's a great opportunity for you to meet people face to face, to build your professional network, and to showcase the research that you've done. The second one is something that Simon Peyton-Jones said yesterday, and I would say that the same applies to a poster presentation, that it gives you access to the world's most priceless commodity, the time and attention of people. And while the skills that you need are different when you're doing a poster presentation, the outcome should be the same, that it's a wonderful opportunity for you to start to build your professional network and to raise your profile in the academic community. So that's really why it matters and why you need to do it well. Anyone recognize this? Yeah? Ben?
Glastonbury.
Were you there last week?
I was.
You were? I don't think that's a picture from this year. Somebody else knew that. Is that Danielle? No? Somebody knew it was Glastonbury. Yeah. Well, Glastonbury is the UK's largest open-air music festival. And last week, Ben, you were in a crowd of, I gather, 175,000 people over 4 or 5 days. Were you there for the whole thing?
Yeah, I was working. So.
You were working? Oh, dear. Very often it's a very muddy experience. I think it was pretty good this year, pretty good weather. And they get bands from global superstars, like last week they had the Rolling Stones there as the big showcase act, to other bands who are less well known or just starting out on their career, and then some acts who are just completely unknown and just there to really enhance their profile. But they're all competing for an audience, the biggest slice of that audience that they can get. And in that sense, I think it's a little bit like a poster presentation session, but on a slightly smaller scale. You're also competing for the attention of your audience. Why should they stop at your poster rather than the next one? Will they stay until you've had the chance to explain what's on your poster? Or will they just move on? So what you need to do, just as all the acts at Glastonbury need to do, is find a way to make your poster and your presentation really stand out. Now, part of that's to do with the poster itself, that the quality and the attractiveness of your poster should be able to pull people in, to grab their attention and make them want to find out more. And then you entice them to stay by the way in which you interact with them, and the way in which you explain your poster and build a rapport with the person who's come to see you. So I've got a question for you, and I'd like you to discuss it for a few minutes in groups of about 5 or 6. You might need to huddle together a bit more. From what you've seen and experienced this week in the poster presentation sessions, can you identify one thing that has made a poster or the presentation of it really stand out and made you want to find out more about that poster and that research? Okay, so if you can sort yourselves into groups of 5 or 6 and 5 minutes just to discuss, and then report back on one thing that you think has made the poster presentation stand out. Yeah, Mohammed?
We always thought a catchy title.
Okay, catchy title on the poster. Were there any that you thought, ooh, that's a really good title? What makes a catchy title?
I can't remember in particular one now, but that's basically what made me stop. And if it made it seem like the topic had something to do with psychology or with something that was outside computer science and or biology or something like that. Okay. Made it seem like the field was applicable to something bigger than itself.
Okay, yes, so something which kind of
technical at times.
Not too technical, yes. Okay, so short, catchy title that is aimed at a more generalist audience than a very specialist audience. Okay? Let's go to the group here. Ben, the group that you were in there, what did you come up with?
What's our favourite? Maybe some kind of some introduction that like either on the poster or verbally, that immediately tells you why you should care about this poster.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So something that provides the context and the rationale for the research. Okay. Right. What about in the middle here? Are you all one big group together, or? Two groups. Okay. Group behind. Is it Istvan, your group?
Essentially one big visual key, like either a demo or like one figure that really captivates your attention.
Yes. That was
Keeps you there.
interesting for me this year. I've seen more demos than I've ever seen before as part of the poster presentation. So people who had their laptops and their notebooks and things with them, or little gadgets that they could demonstrate things with. And that makes things different, doesn't it? It makes things stand out. Okay, let's go to Benhart, your group.
Commitment and enthusiasm of the speaker.
Yes. Okay. How does that come across?
Like you can see when you walk around if the speaker's already having a presentation or giving a presentation to somebody else, I guess you can directly tell if he's committed to his presentation or not.
Yes. Okay. So a passion for the subject, for the research, and a desire to communicate it to others.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Let's go to the front. What did you come up with, Ivo? Your group.
Pretty much everything that everyone has already said.
No original
The
thought.
thing we could add was perhaps having the results in a more graphical form,
Okay.
if
Yeah.
possible.
Yes.
Because people are also interested in what you achieve,
Yeah.
and if it's an image instead of just text, it actually helps.
Yes. So the visuals are not just there to make it interesting, but to actually aid the explanation and aid understanding. Yep. Okay. Alexei, your group? Oh, sorry, were you the same group? Okay. Next group, up there, yes, in the middle. Red jumper, sorry, I don't know your name.
I think pretty much everyone said our
Okay.
ideas.
Have we missed anything? Has any other group got anything that we haven't mentioned? Okay, well, from what's come out, it's clear that a successful poster presentation is a double act. It's you and the poster. You can't rely on the poster to do all the work for you, but you can't do all the work without the poster. You have to work in harmony. The poster has to work for you as you explain clearly what your research is all about and where you're at in your research. Now, I think that if you have a weak poster, that if you're a good presenter, that can compensate for it. You talked about enthusiasm and excitement, passion. And if you've got that, and if you're able to communicate face-to-face very clearly, that can, to a degree, make up for a weak poster. But if you've got a strong poster and you don't present it well, I'm not sure that works. That equation really isn't successful. Would you agree? Yeah? Okay, so what I'm going to do is look at 5 things that will really make you stand out as in a poster presentation session. The first is to have the right mindset. The second is to start off the right way. The third is to have a satisfying conversation, not a lecture. The fourth, I've forgotten what the fourth is now. Oh, I missed one. Oh, yeah. Fourth is the poster itself, a high-quality poster. And the last one is making a good final impression, the way in which you end your conversation with an individual. So we're going to look at each of those. So the first one is your poster itself. So that's the starting point for you as you get ready to do a poster presentation. And I think these are really the key points that you need to bear in mind when you're preparing. The first is that you have to know your audience. As with any kind of professional communication, who you're speaking to will determine what you say and how you say it. And with your audience, whether they are specialists in your field or specialists in a related field or whether they're a more general audience, you need to know that in advance so that you know what to put in there. It will influence the content, it will influence the level of detail in there, it will influence the kind of jargon that you put in and the amount of jargon that you have to explain. It will also influence the amount of context that you have to give for non-specialists to be able to access the details of your poster. And also whether they are an audience of speakers of your own mother tongue or whether it's an international audience. If your audience are looking at your posters and reading them in a language which is their second or their third language, you may also have to think about some techniques in writing it which make it easier for non-native speakers of the language to understand. Just out of interest, when you do posters, do you always do them in English or do you do them in other languages too? Bernhard, always English? Yeah? You're the nodder for me today. Anyone else do posters in other languages than English? No, always English. Okay. So the second thing is to follow instructions. Very often, when you are asked to present a poster at a conference, you will get specific instructions from the people hosting the conference. And in this case, you got some very specific instructions from Microsoft on what your poster should look like and what it should include. And it's very important that you read and you follow those instructions. They will give you helpful guidance, but they may also be important instructions for the people organising the conference. The next one is to make sure that at the beginning of the poster you give the big picture, the context. So you're starting with a general picture before you get down into the detail. And that's really important, but especially for people who are reading your poster and are not experts in your field. Balancing the text and the visuals. You said, Ivo, that visuals are important there sometimes just as a way to help to explain your results. And I think I've read that a good rule of thumb for the amount of text on your poster is 300 to 500 words. But actually, 500 words is a pretty crowded poster with a lot of text on it. And I would say the closer you can get to 300 words, the better. I read a quote on a website the other day which said, "An uncluttered poster is a sign of an uncluttered mind, and that's the person I want to talk to." That was an academic on a website writing about posters. So you need to keep your poster simple, both in terms of the amount of text you put on there and the quality and the size of the visuals that you put on there. Think about how your poster is going to be used. Now, in this case, you were with your posters for an hour and a half, but after this event, I understand they're going on the website. So they're available to other people to read without you being there to explain them. And if they have to stand alone like that, then it's very important that you have enough information in the text for people to be able to follow it when you're not there to explain it. It may also be your poster is up at the conference, but you're not there. You know, you've walked away. People may actually choose that moment to come and see your poster. They feel happier just being able to read it in peace without you looking over their shoulder. And then they may wait for you to come back to explain it, but they just want to be able to read it. So it's important that it does stand alone. And that when you're reviewing your poster, that's a really important criterion to think about. Think about, the quality of your visuals. I like Thomas's poster here because the visuals were really high quality. He'd used photographs which looked great, and a lot of you had done the same thing. But they really do have to be high quality. They have to be big enough to be seen from a distance. They have to look up to date. I would say get rid of those little stick men that came out on PowerPoint in the 1980s. That really does look pretty dated now. So make sure that your visuals are as up to date as your research is. and that they really enhance the professionalism that comes across in your poster. We talked about titles, and you said at the back there, short, snappy titles. Well, this was quite a risky title, I thought, Thomas, wasn't it? So it's a one-word title. I think it's probably the only title that had the only poster that had a one-word title, and it's a word that doesn't really exist. So it's risky in that sense, that people can think, huh? What's that about? Or they could think, oh, I wonder what that's about. It's brave, and sometimes you do have to take risks like that. There were other titles that I really liked. There were a couple which were questions. Somebody had, are you browsing safely? You know, a question that actually addresses the people in the room. That's a powerful way to use a title. Or things which show progress, like somebody wrote from ego network to social network. So you get the idea that your research is actually moving something forward. There were lots of titles which started with modelling, creating, any others that you did that started with ing? Computing, yeah, what was yours, Soma? Combining, yeah. Now, last year I would have said, good idea to start with a verb in the title because it makes the title very dynamic. But actually, if 60% of the posters have a similar kind of style in the title, it's not going to stand out anymore. So you need to find something else. Another way to do it. So short, snappy questions, other kinds of statements, something intriguing. Somebody's was War of the Worlds. Was that Natasha? Is Natasha here? No. War of the Worlds as the main title and then a subtitle under that. So, you know, just something which is going to intrigue your audience and isn't too technical for a generalist audience. You need to make sure that the title and the visuals and the headings can be seen from a distance, about 2 meters away, I would say, so that people don't have to come too close to decide whether they want to view it further and have an explanation. So when you're reviewing it, put the poster up somewhere and then go away, come back and have a look at it and see, does this really catch my attention as I approach it? Anything else you think makes a strong first impression when you look at a poster? Anything we haven't mentioned so far?
Maybe colours?
Yes, that's a good point. Yes. What kind of colours did you think worked?
Bright ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that a guideline about colours is limit them. So those of you who chose shades of blue or blue and green, or somebody used orange, which I thought was also quite brave, but actually when it was printed off, it was very eye-catching. You want to avoid the rainbow effect in colours. So use colours to make it look harmonious, rather than just to make it look like a bit of a rainbow.
So what about the affiliation? Is it, I mean, I kind of look out for that, where is this person from? So I kind of always find it more that this is in a predominant space. Some people, for example, put it at the bottom of the poster that I personally find a bit harder than it's up at the title. So do you think, from your point of view, is that important?
I'd agree. I tend to look for the affiliation at the top, but I know that some people... Some templates, that's right. You have to put it at the bottom, don't you? Max Blank people, do you have to put your name at the bottom? So sometimes you're restricted, but ideally, yes, I'd put it at the top. Yeah. Think about the headings that you use within the poster. Can you make them more interesting than goal, motivation, results? Can you use those headings to be a bit more specific about what your goal is? I didn't see any that did that this year, but last year there was somebody whose headings were things like network hardware isn't what it used to be. That was one heading within the poster. And the next one, driver developers can't keep up. Okay, so the headings actually draw you in once you've got past a catchy title. Some people put photos on their posters. What do you think of that? Do you like that idea? I liked it. It made the poster seem much more friendly. And it also means that if your poster is standing alone, If it is on a website, but you've met people already, they might associate the poster with you. They remember the face from the conference. So it can work that way. Contact details also, many of you put on, but not all. And I think also that can be quite helpful for your poster to stand alone. Yeah, make sure that you check it. That you check the spelling, that you check the grammar, and that you check the accuracy of the content. And then get someone else to do the same, because you don't always see the errors in what you've written. So yeah, third-party opinion once you think it's finished is really important. Don't send it for printing until you've got that third-party opinion. Any other thoughts on creating a poster that stands out? Yeah.
I actually wondered if you had any thoughts on the sort of material and how it's printed. So personally, I find gloss finish quite hard to read.
Yeah.
But lots of people now are printing them on cloth material posters, so you can carry them with you. I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
That sounds interesting. Yes, I don't.
Often when you transport it, you end up, squishing it, and you end up with these lines on it where it's been folded, especially on the gloss.
Yes, and then you ruin that professional impact that you've worked so hard to create. I haven't seen cloth ones. Do they actually look smart and professional?
Yeah, they do. I mean, there's certainly a matte finish, but they come out very nice, and you can fold them up.
Yeah, I haven't come across that, but that sounds like a good way to go. Scarlett, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we also have in Microsoft, sometimes when there's enough time, we do have kind of better printing with some kind of padding in the back, etc. So it does kind of give a more sturdy look, and it does help with the first impression to have a kind of impeccable looking poster.
Yeah, just simple things, just the way that they're transported, but yeah, very important. Okay.
Excuse me, may I ask something?
Yeah.
About the structure of the poster, because I often see that people tend to, it's like they want to reproduce their paper with exactly the same structure on the poster. So they have an abstract, an introduction, or related word section, or everything up to a conclusion. So is that something that we should do, or we shouldn't?
I think it depends, and going right back to the first point here, it depends on your audience. You may decide that for a particular audience, that's appropriate. It may be that if your audience are specialists, then that would be the approach that's most helpful for them. It's what they would expect, and the abstract in itself provides the way in for them. But if you are designing a poster for a more generalist audience, you might need to think a bit more creatively than that, and actually present your research in a completely different way. One thing that I read the other day, which I thought was interesting, was just flicking back to this one, that if you want to catch your audience's attention, then putting some kind of a visual hook or even a question that catches people's attention in the top left corner, it's a really good place to put it, because in most cultures, that's where you start reading. So if there's something in that top left corner that's eye-catching, that can really work in your favour. So I saw it on Ploy's poster. I'm sure other people did it, but hers was the one that I picked it out on. There's a very useful online tutorial on designing posters for presentations on this website. Vita is a local organisation that some of you may have contact with. It provides support for researchers. And if you go to their website, there's a related link to an online tutorial by the University of Leicester. And it really is very, very helpful on helping you with layout and colouring and amount of text and so on. So that's worth looking at. And you'll get these slides afterwards, so you can access that easily. Okay. The next thing that you need in order to make a successful presentation is to be in the right mindset. Andy Murray, our great British hope for Wimbledon this year, made it through to the semi-finals the other day, coming back from being down by 2 sets and winning the match. And one of the commentators on the match afterwards said, well, he just had a great mental attitude. And top sports people know that when you want to perform well, is as much in the way that you're thinking about it as it is in your physical fitness and your physical performance. And doing a poster presentation is a kind of performance. You need to be in the right mindset to do it well, to convey that passion and excitement and that need to communicate it with your visitors. So on the left-hand side here, you've got unhelpful mindsets. And if any of you had these kind of things going on in your heads, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but that very commonly that might be the sorts of things that people think. On the right, you've got some alternative ways of thinking. So the top one gives you positive energy, gives you a real drive to make the most of this opportunity to build your profile within this academic community, to give it your best shot. The second one, about excitement, recognises that it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it that counts. And if you're thinking the right way, if you're thinking that you're excited about it, then that comes across in your face, in your body language, and in the confidence that you exude. And the third one recognises that this could be an opportunity not just for you to give information, but for you to get some ideas back. That this is going to be a two-way conversation. So get yourself into the right mindset before you start. Keep that mindset. I imagine you were probably pretty exhausted as you went through that an hour and a half session. Some of you were busy from start to finish, and you have to keep on talking yourself into feeling excited about it, getting ready for the next person who wants an explanation. Then you need to start in the right way. That means, before anyone arrives, thinking about how you're going to manage the space that you've got. Now, some of you had better spaces than others. I don't know what you thought of the space that you were allocated. Sometimes it can work fine, doesn't require thinking about. Other times it's a bit challenging to work out just where to stand. But what you need to do is find a place where you can face the traffic. So you're facing out from the poster, so you can see people coming past, that you can smile and make eye contact and look as though you want people to come. You don't stand looking at your poster. And you need to continually manage your space. You may have thought at the beginning that you were in a good place, but as things went on, you realised you actually had to move out. I think, Fiona, you said that, didn't you, yesterday, that you realised after a while that you weren't standing in the right place for... is it Fiona? Is that right? Yes. You got the right person, yeah. You weren't standing in the right place for you to be able to accommodate more than one person seeing your poster. So you actually changed your position, didn't you? Yeah. So that's important, that you're aware of the space. Second one, positive body language, that you look as if you're happy to be there and you're there to stay. So if you've got a jacket over your shoulder, over your arm, put it down. If you've got a bag on your back, put it down. Because they just make you look as though you're passing through. You want to get away again. And make sure you look as if you're a permanent fixture. Careful timing. So when people come to your poster, sometimes they want to read it first, and sometimes they want you to explain it first. If somebody comes to your poster and doesn't make eye contact with you, what do you do? Do you say anything, or do you just let them read, or what do you do?
Yeah, probably remain silent.
Yeah, I think in that case that's a wise thing to do. Probably they just want to read the poster. But you mustn't let them get away without speaking to them. So at a moment that you think, well, looks like they've finished now, or they want some explanation, you look for a change in the body language, and then you say, would you like me to explain anything to you? So you time it carefully. Also, start with a question. And I was really impressed with a number of you that did this really well, particularly on the second day, on Wednesday. Wednesday? Yes. Most of you that I went up to asked me about my experience, my background. So you know then how to pitch your explanation, how much detail to go into, how much jargon to use and what to avoid. Don't just launch into your lecture about your presentation, about your research. Any other thoughts about how you start off? Were there any other challenges for you in starting off? Okay, let's go on. Next point is important, that it's a satisfying conversation. And again, I was really impressed that this year how many of you made this really into a two-way interaction. Very, very few of you just lectured. Most of you waited for the person you were speaking to come in with questions and comments and ideas. It was great. So some of the things you need to do, especially in a multinational environment, is make sure that you allow people to tune in to your accent. Because you all have different mannerisms when you're speaking English, just as I do. And when you're moving from one to the next, to the next, to the next, it takes a while to tune in to the way that a particular presenter speaks. So what enables that to happen better is your first few words or your first few phrases are not the important ones. You don't go straight into the detail. You start off perhaps with introducing yourself, saying where you're from, what your background is. You ask a question of them, so would you like me to explain? Or what expertise do you have in this area? So it's all just small talk really, which has the purpose of helping the other person tune into your accent. And then you give signpost language that helps the other person to see where you're at. So you might say things like, the objective of my research is to, that's signposting, the detail of what's coming next in that sentence. Or what we're trying to ascertain is, or the biggest challenge that we've faced is, and all those sorts of phrases provide signposts for non-native speakers of English into the detail of what you're going to say. So remember to allow that to happen. Slow down, whether you're a native English speaker or a non-native English speaker. Make sure that you speak not just at conversational speed, although this is a conversation, but you need to slow it down, especially if your audience are not specialists in your field, so that they can grasp what you're saying, have an opportunity to digest it, and then you pause to enable them to come in with a question or a comment.
Just a comment here. I also found that some of the posters, there was quite a bit of background noise because the next poster would be so close by. So you'd have to really concentrate very hard to get the conversation going. And I think especially then speaking loud and clear and slow helps certainly to convey the message.
That's right. That's really important. Yeah, it was quite a challenge for some of you to make yourselves heard with all the background noise. And that's where the next point comes in as well, that you need to find the right distance from the person you're speaking to or from the group of people that you've got in front of you. Sometimes you may need to move closer to make sure that you can be heard and hear the other person, but you still need to respect personal space. And that's something which differs from culture to culture. So people have different ideas of how close it's acceptable to stand to another person. So sometimes you just need to silently negotiate that until you're both comfortable with the space that you've got.
I just have another comment as well. I mean, I know this is my third summer school, and every year there's a discussion about the poster layout and space, and there are always some posters that are slightly disadvantaged to some others. Only on one occasion I have seen the perfect poster space, and that was in an enormous conference center in Nice, where basically every kind of a set of posters had one corner in a room, and there were like 6 posters displayed, but all for different poster sessions. So at any one poster session, there would not be more than one poster meant in that corner, and they were like hung up there for the whole week. But obviously that needs massive amounts of space. So there doesn't seem to be in most cases an optimal solution.
No.
And you have to just work with what you get at the time.
Yes, I think that's right. Yes. There's no point in thinking, oh, this is a disastrous space they've given me. This is never going to work. You just got to work with what you've got and make the best of it. Eye contact. Again, I was very impressed with the amount of eye contact that was going on between you and the people that you were presenting to. But there's a couple of things to remember here, that if someone comes to you and you're deep in conversation with one person, then someone else comes along. Make sure that you at least make eye contact with the newcomer so that they're aware that you've acknowledged their presence. Sometimes that's difficult because you're in quite a deep conversation with an individual, but you need to also be aware of what's happening around that conversation and whether there are other people who might like to join in. Use eye contact also to determine when you've gone too far, when you've gone into too much detail for people, or when they've stopped understanding you. You can pick it up quite easily from looking at people's faces, can't you? Next, use your hands. Make sure that your hands are free to gesture. So I would say, if you've got a bottle, a lot of you were standing with a bottle in your hands, and I can understand that you needed to have some water, but put it down when you're actually in a conversation with people so that your hands can be used to reinforce and explain what you're trying to say. In a multinational context, that's really important because your gestures are an additional route to understanding for people. Any comments, any thoughts? Okay. Just a few other things about this conversation, making sure it's a conversation. First, be flexible. You need to be able to adapt what you say depending on who it is in front of you and the amount of knowledge and the amount of interest they have. So it may be that you prepare in advance, that you have one version of your explanation for people who just pass by, really have absolutely no knowledge of your subject area, but who've been drawn in by your poster. And then you might have another explanation for people who have sought you out specifically. They've seen your name on the list, they're interested in your research, and they've actually come to find you because they want to know more about it. So you have to be prepared for that. Sometimes you can think on the spot, sometimes you actually need to think that through in advance. Make sure that when you're introducing your research, you give the big picture and the context before you get into the detail, and that you give an objective that's quite broad. You know, what we're trying to achieve is, and then you might get into more detail after that. So big picture, then the detail. We talked about signposting language, so things like what we've discovered so far is, or what was surprising was, or it was disappointing that, or the second point is, and all those kind of phrases that just introduce what you're going to say, but don't actually give any content, but they really help non-native speakers to focus on what's coming next. Some of you did that very naturally and very well. Watch out for jargon and abbreviations, which are in daily use where you work. Everyone understands what, well, FOL was the one we were talking about yesterday, wasn't it? But there were so many. There was, what was it, NERBs or something? Yeah, I can't remember. But there were millions and millions of acronyms. And you need to just take care with acronyms. Don't assume that people will know the acronyms that you use daily. Think about your audience. Test out acronyms. If you've said something, do you know what that means? Just make sure that people stay on your wavelength. And if you can explain give the full explanation first. So my research is about first order logic, that's FOL for short. Then that helps people to maintain a level of understanding. Watch out with acronyms in your titles and in your headings, because that can be quite off-putting unless they are really familiar to everybody. Make sure you've got examples, because examples are what are going to bring your explanation to life for people. And some of you use really good examples. Ben, your example of the airline website was one which appeared on your poster, and then it helped you to give a clear explanation of what you're trying to achieve. And it was a good one to choose because it's something that probably most people have done. You know, they've been on airline websites. Have we got Jing Jing here? No? Jing Jing gone. Yeah, she was talking about making aeroplanes and the different parts that go together to make up an aeroplane. And again, it brings to life what her research is all about. Or you can use, or paint pictures for people. Somebody, I don't know who it was talking about marketing, revenue maximization. Who was that? Yes. And you talked about, imagine that you're targeting, in your marketing, you're targeting women under 40, and I'm targeting men under 30, or something like that. So again, just that, imagine that. Use that kind of language. Or analogies. Who was telling me about balls on springs? Yes, Eva, yes. So we were talking about genetics, basically, weren't we? But you started off with balls on springs, the idiot's guide to your subject area. So, find a real-life image that somebody can relate to. Listen and look. So watch people's reactions. Watch to see when they want to come in and ask a question or make a comment. And invite them in.
I've got another comment, just observation. I mean, sometimes you as a poster presenter, you kind of get stuck with someone and you have a long conversation. And I've observed that a few times. And I thought, oh, is Andrew Blake standing there? What a great opportunity. And you wish the student would just turn and grab that opportunity and present the poster to Andrew. Is there any kind of advice on how you can do that? I mean, I guess sometimes it's useful to have a long conversation, but maybe better to kind of not be too long because you want to give the opportunity to others as well.
Yes. I think it's that eye contact thing, isn't it? That you always need to be aware, not just of who you're speaking to, but of who's around. So keep your antennae tuned to the people who are around and looking interested. And then you might say to somebody who's been taking your time, you might say, well, I'm sure you want to go and have a look around the other posters. Please don't let me keep you. Something that's polite and respectful, but find a polite moment to break up that conversation. Yes, you don't want to miss opportunities like that. This was I love this picture. This is Fabio. Is Fabio here? No? Fabio gone. This is a real conversation taking place here, isn't it? Around his poster. Fabio's just essentially listening to what these other two people are talking about. And that's great. It's an opportunity for him to learn what other people think. And he's in a good place to have eye contact with both of those people. Final impressions. You want a smooth ending to the conversation that you have. You need to end confidently. So have some phrases ready to sort of fade out of the conversation, not to do it abruptly. So just things like, it's been a pleasure, or thank you for stopping, or you've given me food for thought. Something that just makes the other person feel glad that they stopped and had this conversation with you. And then think about if you can give them anything to take away. Are there any freebies that you can give them? Or just a business card? Or some kind of handout that will perhaps give a little more detail. I didn't notice anybody doing that this time, but did anyone give anything at the end? No? It's worth thinking about, because again, that's one small way at the very end to make yourself and your poster stand out from the rest.
Yeah, for example, in Microsoft we prepare these small postcards, and not everyone, we have a big stack for each project, and then we just put them there, and people can just take a copy, and if they, with Gadgeteer, for example, has got some hardware pictures on there and the URL, so that you know where to go next.
Yes, okay, yeah, so something like that, yes. Okay, so those are the 5 things to consider. The right mindset, a poster that stands out, a confident beginning, a satisfying conversation, and a strong final impression. It's not rocket science. A lot of it's just plain social skills. But it is a performance of sorts. You need to feel the adrenaline flowing. You need to realise that this is an opportunity, a professional opportunity that you need to grasp But if you're able to channel any nervous energy that you have positively and focus on giving 110%, on building rapport and a relationship with the person who's come to speak to you, it should be an opportunity that you end up reflecting on really positively, glad that you did it, and looking forward to the next time. That's where I'd like to finish. Any questions? Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I guess I have a comment.
Yeah.
I agree with almost everything that you said, but you make all of this look very complicated. I mean, in the end, if I look at the poster, I ask myself, what will I remember of this poster in 3 days?
Yes.
And for all of us, it's the truth that this will be very, very little.
Yes.
It will be no details, it will be no text, it might be a picture.
Yes.
It hopefully is the idea.
Yes. That's a really good point, actually.
So this is actually the only thing you need to get across, and it doesn't matter where you stand, how you put your hands, what pictures you put in the left corner.
Yeah.
As long as you get the idea safely across, you're just golden.
Okay.
So this is, I don't know, I mean, all of this help, of course, but I think it's, yeah, you can put this in a
it
much shorter
facilitates
talk.
this happening, right? I mean, a similar way to Simon PJ, who kind of said you want to get this one idea across in your research talk, and putting the picture in the right place, being inviting, being ready when the opportunity comes. I think that does help.
Yes, yes, but you're right to a degree. I do agree with you. But I think that one thing that is important is that it's not just about the poster and an idea on the poster. It is about you as well. And long after people have forgotten what you said, they'll remember how you made them feel. And if that was a comfortable conversation. So it's an opportunity for you to build your reputation and your credibility as a person and a professional. So I think it is worth really taking into account all the social skills as well.
We do have one collaborator here in England at Hull University who says, as a student, nowadays you have to create your own brand, and I think a good presentation at the poster helps you do that.
Yes, and I think the other thing is that, as I said, your poster has to stand alone as well. So if it's going to be on a website afterwards, or at a conference for the whole week, then people have got a chance to take away more than just a main idea. If they want to, they've got a chance to go back and read it again and get some more detail from it. And so it's important that you are thinking about the detail as well as the big picture. Yeah.
I think it's also good to know that like many people take pictures of posters nowadays. At least I experienced it. They go around with their cell phones and posters they like, they immediately take a picture and send it to colleagues. So it's really worth spending some effort in a
So you don't quite know where it's going to end up, or what effect it's going to have. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So how do you think in an international conference, if you at some point know for sure that you share a language with one of the, like with a current active viewer of the poster. So is it appropriate to switch to that language if you kind of expect that you will be both more comfortable with that? So is it appropriate, or is it kind of thought to be something like not the best way to go?
Well, I would say it's okay in that it's an opportunity to build a closer empathy with the other person, and that's really what you're looking to achieve. But I suppose the caveat is if there are other people around that don't speak that language, you don't want to be creating a barrier and making other people think, oh, we can't go there because he's speaking Russian, or, yeah. Anything else?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve.
Okay, thank you very much.